La verdad es un placer ver la sala tan llena. La verdad es que es todo un privilegio para todos los presentes aquí poder tener hoy al señor. Es un privilegio para todos los presentes hoy aquí poder tener a Werner Herzog para ofrecer esta masterclass que promete ser una sesión muy libre, muy impredecible y básicamente como él, ¿no? y como sus películas. Va a ser pues una lección no solo de cine, sino bueno, una lección, un aprendizaje de experiencias y de filosofía vital, ¿no? Que es lo que podemos encontrar también en sus películas. El Festival MAPFRE 4+1 está muy contento con que nuestro invitado de honor este año sea Herzog y pueda ofrecernos esta masterclass. Su cine se emparenta mucho, está muy en sintonía con la filosofía que defiende 4+1 respecto a esa radical independencia, ¿no? Como autor, alguien que siempre ha estado alejado de las modas y de las tendencias, que ha sido fiel a sí mismo y que su cine, desde que comenzó con 19 años con el corto Heracles, que se puede ver en el ciclo programado en el CCBB, hasta su última película, Into the Abyss, que también está programada en el ciclo, ha mostrado una coherencia extraordinaria, ¿no? En sus búsquedas y en sus inquietudes, y que sintonizan además de una forma muy clara con el cine contemporáneo. Por lo tanto, no voy a quitarle más tiempo, os voy a dejar con Werner Herzog, que seguro que nos va a sorprender a todos y vamos a aprender mucho de esta sesión. Muchas gracias y un aplauso para Herzog.
Thank you. Thank you and good morning to Bogota, to Buenos Aires, to Mexico City, and to, of course, to Madrid. Good afternoon, buenas tardes. Because this is live streaming, it's a new terrain, and I like the idea that we are looking for new forms of festivals. Of course, we have to look for new forms of films. In particular, as cinema or filmmakers now have a very, very big challenge. And it has to do with all the new instruments of virtual realities. You have the internet, virtual realities on the internet. We have digital effects in cinema. We have Photoshop, we have reality TV. All of a sudden, our sense of the real world is massively challenged, like never before. Within 20 years, the world is a different one for filmmakers. And you, as a young generation, you have to find new answers. I'm trying to find new answers, and we can share some of these ideas. I would like to have much of your participation because I'm here to listen to you, your vision, your perspectives, your problems, your obstacles. So I want to hear from you and I try to be helpful. The only thing where I can be helpful would be teaching practical things, not so much about cinema, but about a way to make cinema. I could teach you, for example, how to steal a car, how to open a safety lock. It needs delicacy and it needs delicate surgical instruments. But it is quite often it is a necessity to know how to open a truck, for example. When I made Stroszek, I filmed at a truck stop in Madison, Wisconsin. And the moment the camera was set up and everything was set up, a truck all of a sudden stops almost in front of the camera. And I asked the truck driver, could he park it maybe 20 meters further on? And he said, no, I'm going to have my coffee. and get lost. And so, well, he went to go for his coffee, but I opened his truck and I drove the truck 50 meters. And an hour later, when I saw he was coming out, before that, I drove it back and I parked it. He never noticed that his truck had been moved. And what you have to know as filmmakers is how to forge documents. For example, how to forge a shooting permit. And Fitzcarraldo would not have been made without massive forgery of a shooting permit. It would not exist because my ship was not allowed to move along the rivers. There was a border war between Peru and Ecuador. Somehow in the air, it hadn't broken out. Nobody knew why there was so much military presence. And at one military station, a young soldier even was ordered to shoot at our ship just as a warning. So I stopped and I spoke to the coronel. I said, "Mi coronel, why do you stop my ship? No, nobody is passing here, and you are going to return." And I said to him, "But I do have a shooting permit." And he said, "Show it to me." And I said, "Well, it's in an office in Lima, but I can bring it in 4 days." So 3 days later, I said, "Yeah, I sent a messenger to Lima," and he brought it back. And it was 4 pages, very beautifully written, on stationery of the presidency of de la Presidencia de la República. And it was in antiquated Spanish, because in these chancelleries they have a very formal, very antiquated Spanish. And it was signed by the president, El Presidente de la República, Belaunde, beautifully signed, and stamps on it, and his secretary of his cabinet signed it in stamps. And of course I signed it. I wrote the whole thing. And I said to the coronel, "Mi coronel, read this now." And he looked at it and reads the first page, and then he goes and sees the last page with the signatures, and he saluted to me and he said, "Pásale, yeah, go on, move on." So you have to develop a certain amount of street wisdom. You do not learn it in film school. You will never learn these things in film school. You learn it in life itself. So my advice to you is travel on foot, because the world reveals itself to those who travel on foot. The world makes itself understood. And traveling on foot 4 months has more value than 4 years in film school. That's my solid opinion, even though I have never been in a film school in my life. So, but I would also like to discuss certain fundamental things. For example, how do you use music, and what kind of music? How do you introduce music? How, for example, you introduce a leading character into your film? And, for example, how do you create sympathy? How do you side with a character instantly? Which is a very, very difficult thing. Or, for example, how do you conspire as an audience with your leading character? So there's a lot of things out there which I could demonstrate to you. In fact, I do have something like 5 hours of clips here, and I could demonstrate quite a few things. But before I start going into things like this, I would like to find out what are your questions, what are your problems, and it can be about your things, it can be about my films, whatever is coming up. Is there anything urgent there? Yes. Is there somebody back there? Yeah. Nobody is daring to say something? Or yes, please go ahead. Say it loud so that everybody can hear it.
I just want to carry on the discussion we started on the beach 2 days ago.
say it louder for the others, please. Yeah, más alto, por favor. Okay.
About film studying and film theory, what's your view on people spending money and time just to read about films and watch films, but not necessarily make them in a period of 4 years, and then think they're prepared to do it so afterwards?
Yeah, film studies, unfortunately, is a disease. Stay away from it, get out of it as quickly as possible. The purely cerebral, intellectual, academic sort of looking at films. Academia is the enemy. Academia will kill all lively instincts within you. So be very, very careful, and you know what I mean, this vapid academic babble about post-structuralist images or post-modernist and about the systematic projections of a single frame image and what constitutes philosophically a single frame. Just pack your bags and run as fast as you can. And the same thing has happened to literature. In school, in high school, for example, we had to vivisect, not dissect, I speak of vivisection of poetry. We had to analyze it, and I hated it so much, so profoundly, that for a while I contemplated to burn the school down at night between 3 and 4 in the morning when nobody was in there. I never did it, but my profound hatred against that is still alive. So be very, very careful. Instead of spending a single hour there, work as a taxi driver, work as a bouncer in a sex club, work in a lunatic asylum, and make some money, and you can make a film. So it's a very dangerous moment where academia seems to take over. So if you want to make films, if you are serious about filmmaking, stay away. Yes.
Shall I use? Oh, thank you. Well, good morning. It's not a specific question, but I could point two of your films. One is, I'm terrible with names, but I saw both. One is a recent one about the death row. Yes, Into the Abyss. Yeah. The death row, and another one. It's about the deep ocean that you make, and do you have a board between documentary and fiction? How do you cross those lines? Those two films made me think a lot about it.
Well, it is a very complex question, and to formulate it to some essences, I do believe that in filmmaking there's still these ideas floating around, like from so-called cinema verite, that facts constitute truth. No, they do not. Facts are facts, but they do not illuminate you. Facts are for bookkeepers. Facts are for the accountants. And I have enraged people of cinema verite by telling them you are the accountant's truth. And the book of books would be the Manhattan phone directory with 4 million entries, everything factually correct, but it does not illuminate you. It's terrible if I lock you up in a prison cell and as the only literature I give you the Manhattan phone directory, you would commit suicide very soon. So, and cinema verite is in essence the answer of the 1960s. But today, with all the virtual realities that have emerged so quickly, the cinema and filmmakers have to find new answers. And for something, and I say it very shortly now, I try to articulate an ecstasy of truth, something that illuminates us, something that steps out of our common regular understanding of the factual world. So, and for this kind of truth, and of course I use truth only with great caution, because mathematicians cannot tell you, and philosophers cannot tell you what exactly is truth. So I'm trying to find an access to the real world in a way where where I know I would illuminate you. I would let you go out of the theater with something which makes you more rich, something that you do not forget easily. So, very, very difficult to give a straight answer, but I even invent. I start inventing, because sometimes, for example, in Little Dieter Needs to Fly, which is a real story of a real pilot who was shot down over Laos in the early phase of the Vietnam War. When I entered his home, just when you go inside, there are 7 or 8 little oil paintings of open doors. And I said to Dieter, who has not much formal training or has never been in high school, and I asked him, Dieter, those are very nice pictures of open doors. He said, open doors? Yeah, they are all open doors. I said, is that of great importance for you? He said, no, well, I bought these pictures because they were a bargain. They cost only $10 per piece. And I said to him, but Dieter, it's all open doors. And he said, yes, I realize now, because an opening and closing a door is such a privilege. Because as a prisoner handcuffed in medieval footblocks, he couldn't move an inch, and he could never move a door. And I said to him, Dieter, you know what, we will make it visible for an audience how important this is. So what he does, he's opening and closing his car door when he comes home. Then he walks from the car to the house, and he opens with great joy, opens and closes, opens and closes, opens and closes. Then he goes inside. From inside, you see how he opens and closes. And then he sticks his head out and says, this may look strange, but for me it's such a wonderful feeling. So it was staged, it was invented by me, and yet it's invented not for deceiving you, not for lying to you. It is invented for
Foi
a deeper
inventado
truth
para
of
chegar a uma verdade mais
Dieter
profunda do Dieter
something
Dengler,
that he would never have
algo
come
que
up,
ele
but I
não
came up.
traria,
And you
mas
have
eu
to,
cheguei a
when you
isso.
do
Eu trouxe
a
isso para vocês.
documentary, for
Então, quando você tem
example,
que fazer um documentário,
you
por
should never
exemplo,
forget that you are filmmakers, you are storytellers. You have to find an audience, you have to introduce characters, you have to find the right voice. I remember I think in Amsterdam or Rotterdam at a festival. It was awful, all documentary filmmakers in the panel discussion. And I was in this panel discussion, and the whole panel, 6 or 7 panelists, were all speaking about cinema verite, and we should be only a fly on the wall. And I just couldn't take it any longer. And I grabbed the microphone and I said, no, we should not be a fly on the wall. We are not going to be the security camera in the bank. So we are not going to be the fly on the wall. We have to be the hornets that sting, go out and sting. So, and then there was uproar, and they all murmured against me, and I grabbed the microphone again, and I shouted to all of them, and there were 400. I shouted to them, Happy New Year's, losers. So you have to find the right voice when it comes to argument. But I might show you a piece from actually Into the Abyss. which has something interesting. Into the Abyss is, let me see, I have a list here which is quite long. Pardon? 53, 60. No, there's, maybe we don't even have it here in my list. It's a, do we have Into the Abyss the beginning? No, number 56, 056, Into the Abyss. Before you played, there's something very interesting because it's the opening of a film, and I spoke to a priest who had to go to an execution half an hour later. So I had something like 12 or 14 minutes with him. I had written to him, and he said, well, it's fine that we do a conversation on camera. He came and he said, quick, 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 I have to go to the execution in a few minutes. So, and I put him, I barely said my name, I'm the one who is written to you, and I started to have a conversation, and he speaks like very superficial, like a phony TV preacher, how beautiful the world is, and that Jesus Christ and God is merciful and has redemption for anyone. And so it was really bad and awful. And he says, the beauty of creation. And at the golf course, he would see a squirrel, or sometimes he would see a horse looking at him. You will see that. And all of a sudden, I stop him and I ask one question, which nobody would ever ask. Nobody will teach you in film school. It's only because I know the heart of men. And I ask him, tell me about an encounter with a squirrel. How do I come up with that? But I'd like to show it to you. Can we show 56? Reverend, you are on duty today. Can you just think about the man whom you are going to encounter in an hour from now? Less than an hour from now.
I really am going there without any expectations. I'm going there to experience what God has prepared for me, for him, for all of those involved. And I don't preconceive anything, not today. I will let that happen as it occurs, as time gets there. We have a loving, caring, forgiving, merciful God. And in time of joy, and in time of need, in time of trial or tribulation, God is always there for us. I want to make that presence to them.
And technically, when he's led to the gurney, what is your duty then?
After everything is completed, as far as the preparation, then I walk over and I stand as he has allowed me to stand. I always ask permission to be able to stand at his feet and hold his ankle. And I move toward that position and I place my hand on his ankle, and then that's what I do until death occurs.
And if there is no family interested in taking care of the body, the condemned men would end up right behind you?
Yes, they end up here at the state cemetery, and they're buried by the state. No names on the crosses, only numbers.
Why does God allow capital punishment?
I don't know the answer. I believe that there's always a purpose why God allows things to happen. God has created so many things in this world. I play golf sometimes. I love to be on the golf course because one thing I do, I put my phone on a silent mode. I go out there sometimes by myself with no distractions, and I can see the beautiful grass. I can see the squirrels from time to time running. Sometimes the deer are running. Sometimes I look across the golf course and I see a cow or a horse, and I stop and I acknowledge life. Life. The things that God has created.
Please describe an encounter with a squirrel.
An encounter with a squirrel. I was driving the golf cart, and I was on the cart path, and I saw two squirrels. They were chasing each other, and as I was getting closer, they were running across the cart path, and I put on my brakes, and they stopped in the middle of the cart path and looked at me, and I said, how about this? If I wouldn't have stopped, I could have run over one of these squirrels. Their life would have ended. And that reminds me, many people that I have been with on their last breath of life, and due to bad choices and mistakes in their life, their life is taken away in the moment. So life is precious, whether it's a squirrel or a human being. So I will sometimes meditate on that experience, make a little noise, and the squirrels will take off and continue their life. But I cannot do that. For someone on the gurney, I cannot stop the process for them. But I wish I could.
At the end actually is a death chamber where they are executed. It's also interesting how music is coming in, and it has to do with the text and the mood of everything. Also can notice how patient the camera is. There's nothing rushed. This is where they die in Texas. Okay, we can stop it there, yeah. So with this priest, what is significant is that as a filmmaker you have to try to go quickly and look deep into the soul of a human being, and this is not an easy thing. You have to have life experience. You have to understand. You have to know the heart of men. So tell me about an encounter with a squirrel. May sound absurd, but all of a sudden it breaks him open. And why this is, how I did it, I cannot explain. But you have to develop techniques that are beyond what a journalist would do. A journalist would come with a catalog of questions, and nobody would have a question like this about the squirrel in his or her catalog. So you have to react to the moment, and you have to find the right voice. And if you do not find the right voice, you will never look deep into the abyss of the human soul. There was a question back there, I think. Yes. Yeah, first here, the gentleman back there, yes. Can you speak, please? Yes. Say it without microphone.
Para que todos ouçam, posso falar em português?
Yes.
Me parece que a abordagem que você utiliza está muito ligada à intuição.
I understand, yeah.
E eu gostaria de saber se você se prepara. A intuição está ligada a um estado de espírito, talvez. Como você chega a esse estado, ou se existe alguma forma de chegar a esse estado para realizar um filme, ou fazer uma pergunta inusitada no momento correto, na hora certa, que vai trazer a alma do personagem para fora? Existe, você se utiliza de alguma forma, alguma técnica ou alguma superstição que seja?
There's no technique. When it comes to intuition, it's not. I'm not born with intuition. I have acquired it. In other words, I've acquired it by experiencing pura vida, pure raw life, traveling on foot, having crossed the Sahara, having been put in prison in Africa once or twice. Fundamental, elementary things that you have to experience in life that nobody can teach you. And of course it has to do with poetry. It has to do with a sense of poetry. And a sense of poetry you have to have in you somehow, but it helps if you read. And I keep telling young filmmakers all the time, you should read. And in Brazil, of course, there's not much reading. There's much more, statistically speaking. People in Finland or Sweden or in Russia read much more, statistically speaking, as an average. But it doesn't matter whether you're in Brazil or in Bogota. My postulate, my demand is not just read. I have to tell you, read, 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 read. If you don't read, you will never be a filmmaker. And you do not need to read books about filmmaking. Stay away from it. Read poetry. Read poetry. Read books that, in a way, show you a certain depth and insight into the world. And I would like you to give you one example, a book that you must read. Everyone who wants to make films has to read at least one book, which is in English. I think it's not in translation. It is called The Peregrine by J.A. Baker. It's about peregrine falcons. The book was published in 1967. And we know nothing about J.A. Baker, almost nothing. We probably know that he worked as a clerk in a library for a short time. But that's about it. We don't even know when he was born, and we don't know when he died. And The Peregrine was written at a time when peregrine falcons were at the brink of extinction in Great Britain. There were only a dozen or 15 or 12 healthy pairs of breeding peregrine falcons left due to the fertilizers and all the poisons in the field. So, and he describes, he observes the falcon, the life and the flight and the hunting of falcons with great precision. And now what makes this book so extraordinary for filmmakers, the precision of observation is absolutely extraordinary. To look at the real world, in this case, it's only falcons. Human beings do not factor at all. Sometimes he says, human beings, how much he hates them with their flailing arms and their loud voices. Sometimes a human being is mentioned. But he speaks about the magnificence of the falcons and how they hunt. And it's a cruel, very cruel hunt. There's no sentimentality. There's no romanticizing in it. And the real important thing is that he describes this part of the world with such a ferocious passion. He's absolutely passionate, and he's absolutely going into ecstasies. He steps outside of himself in such a delirium of illumination what he sees. He describes, for example, how a falcon soars up higher and higher and higher, and it reaches its zenith, and then we swoop down, and all of a sudden he says, we are diving down, and we are hunting a bird, as if he were a falcon himself. And when you immerse yourself into any part of the physical world, anything, human beings, falcons, landscapes, political subjects, it does not matter. That's the attitude you have to have as a filmmaker. That's what you should have, the spirit of Baker. So, the Peregrine of J.A. Baker, if I see you in half a year again and you haven't read it, I will not let you walk through this door here again. So, and it's very easy to find it on the internet. You have to read it in English. It cannot be really translated well because the prose, the text has such a beauty and intensity. There's language that we have not seen since Joseph Conrad. So that's one specific thing you have to do. And if you don't read English, learn English so that you can read it in English. Okay.
I have a curiosity and a question. And the question is about the difficulty of the ethical boundaries when you make a documentary, when you portray people and you're trying to, I don't know, be not use their image in a bad way. And the curiosity is the iguana at Bad Lieutenant.
Okay, the ethical boundaries, of course, they should always exist somehow in every one of us. But where your ethical boundaries are, I do not know. But you have to find them. You have to establish it. An example would be Grizzly Man. There was a tape, a videotape, when Timothy Treadwell and his girlfriend were killed by a bear and eaten by a bear. The press, the media knew it, and it was publicized. The 6 minutes of their being killed and eaten is on a tape. However, it's not on video because it was a video camera, and the attack came so unexpectedly that the young woman dropped the camera without taking the lens cap off. So it's only the audio portion. And the producer, the distributor, and the television network said to me, you have to address it because everybody wants to know what's on this tape. And I said, yes, I will address it, but I do not know whether I will publicize it or not. So my way to address it was I filmed myself from behind, and I look at the face of the woman who lived with Treadwell and established a foundation together with him, and I have earphones, and she's trying to read from my face how terrible it is what I'm hearing, and she starts to cry because she sees some horror on my face, but you do not see my face. And I take the earphones off and I tell her, you should destroy it, which she actually didn't do. I was so shocked that I said something very, very stupid. She actually put it away in a safe deposit box in a bank. And so the producers and everybody said, yeah, but what's on the tape? I said, it's not going to end up in my film. It is so horrifying, and there's an ethical boundary. And the boundary is the dignity of a human being's death. and the privacy of a human being's death. And for example, if you pay me $5 million to film an execution, I would say, no, I'm not going to do this. There shouldn't be executions in the first place. And secondly, I would not, only over my dead body, you would get me in there to film. So, but you have to develop it, well, unfortunately, there's too much executions around in the world, and all the populous nations have it. China, India, Japan, Indonesia, Pakistan, Nigeria, all the populace, with one exception, Russia, gave it up, thanks to Putin, whom I like for that. So, but it's obvious, I cannot teach you where your boundaries would be, but you have to be very, very much alert, because what you see now on the internet normally knows no boundaries and knows no ethics. Things that should not be shown on the internet, beheadings of hostages in Pakistan or Afghanistan, you do not show it. Or child pornography, accessible for almost everyone. You just have to find your own boundaries, and eventually, in certain cases, I'm even favoring censorship. But I would like to be the censor, the only one. I wouldn't trust in any any sort of jury or any form of committee. Committees are the death of intelligence. But the boundaries, what can I say? I have found my own boundaries with my second film that I ever made, Game in the Sand. It's about children and a rooster. And shooting somehow got out of hands, and the children, the boys, the young boys, became violent. And I didn't stop it. And I filmed it. And I have never published this film. And it will not, and I made it when I was 20 years old. So half a century later, I still have not shown it to anyone. And it will not be shown to anyone as long as I am alive. And I learned it by mistake. So I learned it through making a film and making a massive, huge mistake. So that's the way I learned it. You do not learn these kind of boundaries in film schools either. So that's why I can speak easier about it. The moment with Nicolas Cage in Bad Lieutenant in The Rooster, I think we should show it, because who has seen Bad Lieutenant? Can I see? Yes, maybe we should show it, because many of you have not seen it. It is number 003. It's interesting because in this is one of the moments that was improvised. It was not in the screenplay. I saw some iguanas and I said, tomorrow I need some iguanas. So you have to allow the film to open up to the wild stuff. Now, Nicolas Cage, a Bad Lieutenant, is always under drugs. He's always completely high and he hallucinates. And so he sees iguanas that his colleagues, the other detectives, they are observing the house of a murderer whom they want to corner. He sees iguanas in his haze of drugs, and the others don't see it. But we, as an audience, see it. Now, this is a very interesting moment, because it's a moment where the audience starts to conspire with the leading character, and it's a very important moment, because we see more. We see what he sees, and nobody else sees it. So there's an absolutely clear conspiracy, and we are irrevocably on the side of Nicolas Cage. Can we play it, please? So New Orleans, watching this house here.
About 20 minutes.
Who else?
His girlfriend, at least one infant. That's as far as we know.
What are these fucking iguanas doing on my coffee table?
There ain't no iguana.
Yeah, there are.
There ain't no iguana.
What the fuck is that? Fucking iguana. Are we set up?
SWAT's round the corner.
No, just no SWAT. Let him stay there.
Well, the duty captain said he wanted to coordinate with us when we entered.
Is that right, Stevie? Is that what you're fucking doing now? Reporting back to the fucking duty
I'm
captain?
telling you what he said.
We need SWAT. We'll call him.
I filmed this myself here.
I don't love you anymore. No, no. To live a lie is a sin. Oh, release me if you don't need me, if you don't want me. Oh, baby, why don't you just let me love again? Oh, let me love again.
Let's go.
I said I found a new love.
Okay. No, when it comes to real wild stuff, I'm my own cinematographer. What we did here in this case was a tiny, tiny little lens, like the head of a match, and with a fiber optic cable connecting to the camera. And I would move only millimeters away from the eye of the iguana, and you see one of them actually bit me. It's the other one, which is not an iguana, but some sort of a desert lizard. And they really bite hard. And what is also interesting is the light that I put. I have a light directly into the camera, in the background, in the window, and I planted a reflector, so that it goes straight into the iguana and into my lens. And I was somehow trying to focus and do things, and I wanted to shoot. All of a sudden the light was gone. And I said, who took my light? Who took my light? And Peter Zeitlinger, the cinematographer, said, I took it away because it's in your lens. I said, no, put it back. I want it in my lens. Don't you see? It's so much better. It's wonderful to have it. Sometimes an effect like this is really strange and gives it a very mysterious touch. And also interesting how the music starts. It's always something very, very difficult to do this. Very often with filmmakers, with young filmmakers who do not have much experience how to handle music, they make a cut, and exactly with a cut they start the music. But be careful. Sometimes an actor he walks into a room and there's something intense going on, and you don't start when he walks through the door. Let him walk in, and he pulls the music with him. Something like this, or sometimes it's a dialogue, or sometimes it's a hand movement, and the hand movement starts the music and intensifies it. I could actually show you a very interesting moment from Bells from the Deep. I found a Jesus. There were actually 104 Jesuses roaming Siberia. And the best one, whom I really liked, was actually on Yenisei River. It's 006. But before you play it, there's something, it's actually the end. For many reasons interesting, because I asked this Jesus, who was a corrupt policeman before, gave up to be police force, and he became a painter. And then he found his mission that he was Jesus Christ. And he had his publicist, and he had his agent, and so on. And I always spoke to him like speaking from poet to poet, or from painter to painter. And I said to him, it would be wonderful if you could, because he's 2 or 3 times in the film, I said I would love to have the end of the film with you blessing the audience. Would you like to do that? He said, of course I would love to do that. Anyone in the world, in the United States, in England, in Uruguay, I will give my blessing. So and then I said, but we have to do it outside. It has to look like Lake Galilee. It was actually a bend of the river which looks like a lake. And he said, fine, yes, I understand you as a painter. And I said to him, let's go out there. And then I had the camera relatively close to him, and he has huge arms, and I tried to measure his wingspan, what would get out of frame. Because he stretches his arms, actually his arms still get out of frame a little bit. And he speaks very beautifully. And then music starts, and watch how the music starts. And what I do quite often is, at the end of all this, I ask him, please take your time, but look in profile and with your eye line over the horizontal. So look somehow like up there for inspiration from God Father himself. So he ends his blessing and very slowly he turns his face around and he looks and looks and the music intensifies. And then I cut to a lake which is frozen, and there are dozens of fishermen who have drilled holes in the ice and they are fishing, and it's very, very cold, and they all look like pilgrims in prayer. So, it's the music I knew before what music it would be. It is actually a church choir, an Orthodox church choir, and it has, the main voice is a so-called basso profundo, a very low bass voice, which is 1 octave lower than a bass voice normally would be. And you will see ice skaters. And there was, among those, was an ice skater who was in the Olympic team of the Soviet Union. Years before, and I asked him, can you do ice skating between all these people? And he said yes. And he skates very, very in a very dynamic way. And he came back. I filmed him. In fact, I filmed 5 or 6 times he was too fast. The rhythm with the music, which I only had in my ear, I had no tape. The rhythm of the music did not fit into the movement of the ice skater. So I called him back and I said to him, I have to shoot it, sir. I want to shoot it again because it will not be right. The music is different. You don't have to be fast. Be majestic. I want to see majestic ice skating. And all of a sudden he does the right thing. And it's a very, very beautiful form of combining music and images. Can we play the end? I really like this Jesus a lot.
Дорогие мои, чада Божии, земля является единой матерью вашей.
Dearly beloved children of God, the earth is your only mother. How foolish and ridiculous seem the sons of the one mother who inhabit all her space and yet sever their contacts, the ones unto the others, only because some were brought to earth at one place and others at another place. Verily I say unto you, a great folly hath befallen the mind of man. Take heed. The struggle of one nation to exalt itself above another nation is a sign of a disturbed mind. And heed the Father's word, which saith that everyone who exalts himself over others shall be made low. Deep sorrow furrows the brow of the Heavenly Father as he looks down upon the obstinacy of his children, especially the obstinacy of the faithful. How many wise words have been written about the faith, yet to this day nobody in his stubborn head can understand that these magnificent writings ultimately lead to these two lines: love God and love thy neighbor. But where is this love? Now the time hath come, when the word of the glorious Father is turned once more to your ears, but it is up to you to hearken to his word. May the prophecy of Isaiah not be visited once more upon you, a prophecy which firmly stated, and to this day doth continue to state, they will hear with their ears, but understand not. They will see with their eyes, but perceive not. For the hearts of these people have grown dull, and they scarcely hear with their ears, and they have closed up their eyes. Be wise then, for mankind is headed straight towards the abyss. But the people have now arrived at the place where one single path brancheth off from this ominous road and leadeth to true perfection.
О себе мне мало.
I think that was the wrong one, but we have another one with the end. Let's have a look at 005, and we'll accelerate it. Oh, actually, there's also something interesting. Let's show the beginning of it as well. What is interesting here, there's a legend of the sunken city of Kitesh, which God, in all the invasions of the Tartars and all the pillaging and burning, they prayed to God to submerge the city at the bottom of a bottomless lake. And this is a lake, and now this is completely invented. It's winter now, beginning of winter, in thin ice. And pilgrims are crawling out on this thin ice to look through the ice and catch a glimpse of the holy city of Kitesh. In fact, those people here who are crawling on the ice are not pilgrims. They were drunks from the country inn. And I paid them, and one of them, if we accelerate a little bit, what is interesting, yeah, there's a second the one stick now. in one hand, and it bit me in the other. We have to
I
stumble back. Can you try to
stumble backwards into the house, fall on my back on the floor,
and the
door
lady speaks
slams
about a
shut.
pig that
Just
attacked
then,
her and bit
the
her
pig
hand,
starts hurling itself at the
which has
doorpost,
nothing to do with
wildly
faith.
gnawing on it
But it's
to get
very
into the
beautiful
house.
that we have
I
it.
was
Yeah.
bleeding badly. I managed
So
to chase the pig
it's
back into
completely
the sty,
wild. Yeah,
and then I ran
sometimes
to
you
the
have to
hospital
go
where I got
completely
an
wild.
injection.
Тьма, я сразу побежала, вскочила, и ее привязала, загнала ее, что она убежала сама в хлев. И я сразу, значит, побежала в больницу, укол мне сделали.
So now this is very interesting because
Maria
one
Pavlovna, have you ever encountered supernatural beings here?
Я ходила раз круг озера.
Yes, I have.
Значит, меня страх взял.
I once
Я
took a
говорю, не
walk
пойду
around the
больше.
lake,
Мне хочется, но я боюсь.
but I was afraid of the dark and I didn't want to crawl around
now
it
he's
anymore.
interesting. He looks like
Then
in
suddenly I heard
in
singing.
deep meditation.
Great joy
He was
welled up
actually
within
so
me.
drunk that he fell asleep.
And I thought to myself,
I had
could
to
it be that
crawl
I'm
out
not
to him and
alone?
wake him up and take him
I
off the
started
ice.
moving around the lake again, and
Can we
immediately saw
accelerate it to
11
the
spirits
to
with
Jesus?
candles in.
Yeah. But again, this is the ecstasy of truth. It's a deeper ayah here. He's still asleep. Yeah. Oh yeah. He moves. He starts to stir.
Ну а далее? Я дам благословение.
Furthermore, I shall grant my blessing unto your mature hearts, the ones that were able to perceive the magnificent word which hath been vouchsafed unto your ears. I shall give ye this strength. Be ye prepared to receive it, but listen attentively to your hearts. Verily, verily, I say unto you, ye shall be openly divided upon this earth into the powers of light and darkness this very year. Ye shall be divided into the wheat and the chaff. But then the harvest will begin,
So hearken unto your hearts. The Lord will not leave anything undone. He maketh no mistakes, but your minds will err. Listen to your hearts, for only a blind man will fail to see the gifts of the Lord.
Отныне не узрит данного вам Богом. Так возьмите же великую благодать Отца. Будьте благословенны.
Receive the glorious blessing of the Father. Be
Да
ye
уставьте в
blessed.
руках ваших.
So he was a little bit too fast, yeah. But you see how far I'm going to find something that is more illuminating, something that is really shaped. There's a will of stylization. I'm a director, I'm a storyteller, and you should be as well. Never shy away from doing the wild stuff. That's what audiences remember for the rest of their days. Yeah. Yeah.
Oi,
Okay.
Herzog.
Sure.
Aqui.
Where?
Oi. Eu tô aqui, ó.
Okay, yes, please.
Bem, para mim, o seu cinema e o cinema é a mais alta potência do falso. E eu acredito muito no acaso dos encontros na hora de uma filmagem e não dou a menor importância ao roteiro. Acho que o roteiro não é uma ferramenta muito importante para se realizar um filme. Eu gostaria que você falasse um pouco sobre a questão do roteiro no cinema.
Yes, I had to ask for one word. Of course, I like to write my own screenplays. There are one or two exceptions where I did not write my screenplay. I would write a screenplay only when I see a whole film. It's like seeing a film here on a screen. And I only write down what I see, what they talk, what the music is, what the landscapes are. So I never spend time. If I don't see a film clearly enough, I would not write a screenplay. So what happens is when it becomes completely clear, I write it in a week or sometimes less. Aguirre was written in 2.5 days on a bus with my soccer team, and everybody was drunk. And the goalkeeper vomited over my typewriter, and I still kept on writing. So I try to work fast, but once I've written a screenplay, normally it takes long time until finances come in place. You have to show the screenplay to financiers, to television stations, to world sales or whatever. So there's a long time in between, and I never touch the screenplay. I never look into it. And I do not want that it exhausts itself, that it becomes stale. So what I do during the shooting, I would read, normally in the morning when I do filming, I would read which sequence it is. Normally I know the story of the film, I know roughly what is going on, but I come completely unprepared. I think those filmmakers who are using storyboards all the time, that's the instrument of the cowards. They do not trust in their own imagination. They are not confident enough to handle a situation. And I never know in how many takes I will somehow cut a sequence. I have no idea. Normally continuity comes to me, and in the last feature film I did, she kept asking me, how many takes are you shooting for this sequence? I said, how would I know? Let's go into it. And I try to do it all in one take. So I approach a sequence as if I had only one single take, which means I start to develop a certain choreography of the actors. They are moving around in a room. And then, of course, the camera has to dance with them. The camera has to move in and weave in, and all of a sudden the camera sees all of you, and all of a sudden I'm interested in your cell phone. And I'm so curious that I come close, I do not cut. So the curiosity has to be so strong that I go for a detail, and I start to do a choreography. And quite often, and this is a great quality of the cinematographer, an Austrian, who is a very, very strong physical man. And he has actually been an ice skater, and he was an ice hockey player for Spartak Prague when he was young. And he's the only one who ever tells me, he puts the camera down when we rehearse, and he says, Werner, the scene has no rhythm. And he was completely right. It's something did not move right, and the dialogue didn't flow right. So it was, part of it was dialogue. I immediately sensed there's something not flowing right. Secondly, the movement of people was not right. Of course, at the end, I would try to, instead of moving all the way to your cell phone, I would cut close to your cell phone. That's much faster. Unless I'm so curious to see your face, how you are into this, and then your cell phone, what sort of message do you have here? So it really depends, and I always allow life to enter the film. Life, real life on the set, around the set, in a foreign country, or in the city of New Orleans. I saw an iguana in a tree, and I immediately was fascinated, and I said, there are iguanas here in the city of New Orleans? People said to me, yes, and I said, I need 2 of them. So, in other words, the screenplay has its own life, and shooting itself, filming itself, principal photography has different laws. And only when you are in a studio, indoors in a studio, and everything is absolutely under control and everything is absolutely organized, then you probably will go according to the script. But I keep the doors open, I keep the windows open, so whatever is coming in that I find fascinating will become part of what I'm doing. Because of that, all of a sudden there is more life in a film like Bad Lieutenant with the iguanas. It's a strange life, and it's not a coincidence that the young lady asked about the iguanas, because she remembers it. That's a moment you always remember about the film. No matter what the story was, you remember the iguanas. So, and it's only because I kept myself completely open. Yes.
É minha vez.
Okay, yeah.
Desculpa se a pergunta for boba, mas eu queria que você me contasse um pouco do coração do Kinski, porque me marcou muito ver todos os filmes Nosferatu, Fitzcarraldo, e você falou de coração, e que eu saiba, o Kinski você conheceu antes de trabalhar com cinema, né? Me conta um pouco do coração dele. Obrigada por todos os seus filmes.
Well, it sounds almost as if you were in love with him, which is fine, yes. Well, I do understand some of the heart of Kinski, but fact is he made 200 films, 205 films or so. Nobody has ever counted them completely, and I have made only 5 films with him. Very complicated man, always at the verge of hysteria. You probably would not like to have him close around you. It's better to see him on a screen, because he was such a pestilence at the same time, and completely crazed, and with sometimes with women, an absolute excess of attention, which makes it unbearable to live with him. For example, when he arrived in Iquitos at the airport with his Vietnamese wife, he steps out of the plane, I embrace him, we greeted each other, and his wife is 2 steps behind him, and I wanted to shake her hand, and he pushes my hand aside and comes that close. It looks like this at me, and hand away, and for 5 minutes he's standing like this in front of my face. So as a woman, whether you are in love with the image of Kinski, fine, but unlivable in real life, unlivable for women, and he has wrecked many marriages, and on his trail are wrecked women. So he left train wrecks everywhere. So not advisable. So please dream your movie dreams. That's fine, but don't ask seriously about his heart. And of course there was a natural, solid amount of stupidity in him as well, and that doesn't make it easy to live with a man like this. And there was a certain amount of violence against women in him, which doesn't make it very livable. When we were at Rio Urubamba at the beginning of Aguirre, where it was shot near Machu Picchu, and he wanted to stay in a tent, expose himself to nature in the jungle. Of course, it rained at night, and he got wet, and there was screaming all night, screaming. Then we built him. He asked us to build a thatched roof over his tent. Again it was raining, and again he got wet. Then he moved into, at that time, the only hotel up at Machu Picchu. There were only 8 rooms, and all the other guests were all night awake because he would scream and beat his wife and throw her against the wall in the corridor. And each morning at 4 or 5, I sent someone up there to wipe discreetly the bloodstains off the wall, because all the other guests were upset. So I just say that to sober you from your feelings of love for Kinski. So keep it for the one on screen, the immaterial one, the projection of light. Yes.
Am I the next or not? Then? Okay. Could you talk about the shoe eating episode? Would you like to talk about this or not?
Well, I have eaten my shoes because I tried to encourage an unknown young man, Errol Morris, to finally finish something, a film. And I said to him, Errol, if you finish that one, I will eat my shoes. And of course, I ate them. Which means you have to you have to stick to your promise. You have to follow through. And there's nothing special about it. Yes, I ate my shoes, but it's quite okay. Everyone can eat. You can eat, the ladies can eat leather bags. It's quite good. You can, they may not be very tasty, but it's something that our stomach can easily handle. Where's the microphone?
Oi. Alô?
Ah, okay.
Então, a minha pergunta é sobre que tipo de movimento, que tipo de ideia, de lapso permite que você que você arranje uma conclusão para um filme. Quer dizer, quando eu vejo um filme, a coisa que mais me impacta é como o sujeito amarra a história. Quer dizer, em literatura, você pode deixar em aberto.
Yes. Well, that's a very, very intense question. How do you start a film, and how do you conclude a film? And I'm good at that. When you look at Aguirre, La Ira de Dios, with all the monkeys on the raft. I don't know who has seen the film Aguirre. So most of you. So you probably remember all the monkeys on board and how he speaks to a monkey and the camera circles around the raft. So this is a very deep end and important, because the curtain will go down, the lights will go up, and you as an audience will be pushed out in the street. And in the street there is sunshine and cars and a different world. So how do you dismiss an audience from a movie? It's a very, very, very intricate question. Same thing is, how do you open a movie? How do you start a movie? How do you introduce the central character? How do you manage to have the audience instantly on the side of that person? It's a very, very, very difficult thing, and you have to be cautious. At the beginning, you have to captivate the audience immediately. At the end, you have to dismiss them. You throw them out in the streets into the real world, and they have to carry some vision, some illumination with them. Maybe your question was only about ends, but it's also, I would like to show you the beginning of a film, and I will show you an end of the film. There's an absolutely ingenious beginning. Some of the best I've ever seen is 041. Viva Zapata. Who has seen the film? Okay, and the Mexicans will like to see that one. Marlon Brando. And it's absolutely ingenious how the leading character emerges out of nowhere. He comes from nowhere, and he immediately is the very, very center. And we never leave him. Can we play the part? It's one of the finest films that I'm making. That's how you introduce a person. I've never seen anything better than this, including my own films. But let me see for an end. Maybe Stroszek. Has anyone seen Stroszek? Not too many. That might be a good one. Number 054. It's with Bruno S. And since I want to make some remarks, since questions very often come about Kinski or about Nicolas Cage or Christian Bale, with whom I have worked. The greatest with whom I ever worked was Bruno S. And you will see him, and it's the end of the film. It's a little long. Let's start it and let's see, and we'll probably fast forward. This was filmed in Cherokee, North Carolina, where there's a real native Indian reservation, completely abandoned late in the fall and in winter. Some real natives for the tourists here. It's just very, very sad place. And Bruno has committed a bank robbery, and he's gotten away with his an old man, and they robbed $34 and went straight across the street to buy things, and he bought a frozen turkey. So he's still around, still with his rifle and the frozen turkey.
Meine letzten $3.
His last $3.
Thank you. Please come again.
So, your car is kaput. And your girlfriend is gone. Und dein Haus they have sold. Da denkst mir fein nix.
You don't mind at all. And he says,
Prost.
Of course I don't mind. But he's inside he's destroyed. Now there's also something, it's the whole end is driven by strange absurdity and this music. Here it starts. It's Solitary, Old Lost John. We'll just fast forward. What is interesting, this motif of a circling car without a driver in it is something I have used in Even Dwarf Started Small. Let's go here. Yeah, he's a little bit further back, a minute back. Can we? So what he does, there's this amusement park with dancing chicken. That's fine here. Yeah, let's go forward. And there were actually dancing chicken, but I had them in special training for 4 months that they would dance as long as possible. They would dance normally only 2-3 seconds. And he's just fiddling around with the electricity there. And he sets the ski lift in motion. And he has set the dancing animals into motion. The technical crew hated all this so much that I had to film it myself. It's one of the best things I've ever done.
53. We'll have a 1080. I hear a truck on fire. We'll have a man on the lift. We're unable to find the switch to turn the lift off. Can't stop the dancing chicken. You send us an electrician out here. We'll be standing by. Over.
It's a little hard to understand. Send an electrician. We can't stop the dancing chicken. Back to your question. I have a feeling, some instincts tell me, why did the crew hate the dancing chicken? Because they saw it out of context. If I show you only the dancing chicken, it's kind of a strange, absurd sort of thing. The question is context. How do you build a context? How does this context get embedded in your heart, and how you take it out into the street and into your life? So it's a very, very important question and an important element of filmmaking. And it's the same thing like in documentaries or in feature films. If you ever see Land of Silence and Darkness, it's about people who are deaf and blind at the same time. It has an incredible end, which, if I showed you the end alone, it would be very banal. A man who is deaf and blind all of a sudden gets up from a bench where there are his mother and a visitor, and he walks away, and he all of a sudden feels the branches of a tree, an apple tree, and he follows this, and then he touches the tree, and he tries to understand the configuration of the branches, and is left all alone. And it's one of the deepest, most heartbreaking moments you can ever see, but for 1.5 hours, the film works towards this end. You have to sensitize the audience sometimes for a specific event. An event that may look, if you take it out of context, which may look insignificant, and all of a sudden it acquires a significance that will never ever leave you in your life. So whoever has seen Land of Silence and Darkness will never forget the end. So what else can I say about it? Take it seriously. And in literature, of course, it functions differently. Poetry functions differently. cinema has its own ways to formulate its ends. Yeah, who has the microphone? Here.
Hello.
Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you for such an inspiring effort. And well, this morning we have spoken about perception and context and experience and feeling the moment of the shooting. And despite being a visual art, cinema being a visual art, when I recall some of your films like My Best Friend and Grizzly Man, Into the Abyss, that personally for me was a groundbreaking film. You're in your cinema, the hearing is something as much important as seeing. It's something that, especially when I see the priest and when I see all the intervals in Into the Abyss, it's about knowing how to hear and how to make things appear. And in your cinema and your whole films, I think that's something very important.
And of course, moments of silence, if I may add that. And in my last films last week I filmed on death row, and I speak to someone who will be executed soon, and he answers something, and I do not ask anything else, and I leave him in silence, because what he said has so much weight that I leave things in silence. And there is one moment, I don't know whether I can show the full silence, a homicide detective speaks about a murder case which is so bad that I cannot even explain everything. A little girl, 1.5 years old, was murdered in an exorcism. Demons, the parents believed there were demons in it, Satan. The devil was in her, and they murdered her in a way that is, you cannot describe it and you cannot imagine. And the homicide detective says, together with my colleagues, we have 100 years of experience. I have been on this job for 37 years, and I have seen crime scenes where there were 5 victims on the floor. And what I have seen here, I have never seen a before or after. End of statement. And he looks straight in the camera and is silent. And he's silent for full 2.5 minutes, which is an eternity in a film. You can tell half a film, but probably it's too long. I filmed until you could not hold it any longer. And sometimes I organize silences. Sometimes I organize little sounds and work with the sounds. And I have understood the importance of this, because when I was 18, 19, there was a group of friends of mine, 8 of us, all of us wanted to make films. And we decided we would help each other. What happened was this. 4 of them never started to shoot. They somehow could not overcome the hurdles of scratching together a little bit money. There were 4 people, 4 young men who made their films. 3 of them failed because of sound. I was the only one who finished his film. And all of a sudden, I realized how important sound was. And sometimes when I'm in a cinema, in a theater, I don't even have to look at the screen. Just by hearing what's going on, within 60 seconds, I would know this is a very good filmmaker, or this is a very bad one. You can tell. So please take sound seriously. Work with sound. It's very easy to have a little microphone. Work with sound. Collect ambiences. I do it until today when I'm on a set. I go out early in the morning and I want to hear how does the traffic sound, how the first birds sounding. I collect in a scene, somebody comes in the door and I hear it's a little squeaky noise. I would ask the sound man, go very, very close and let's record it. We record it a couple of times. And in editing, I put that little sound into it more prominently. And all of a sudden, a film becomes very, very rich. The texture very, very often comes from sound. So, and every one of you can do it very, very easily. It doesn't cost you any money. It doesn't cost much effort, but You have to pay attention and you have to understand the world as if you were blind and you would only rely on what you hear. Pretend to be blind and start to listen. And that's what is of essential importance. I would like to ask more, what are your problems? What are your visions? What are your obstacles? Let's try to focus more on these things, because yes, there's a lady back there, young lady back there.
Hi, I'm a film editor, and actually it was really strange for me. I have been working in film. Can you
speak a little louder with the mic?
I have been working in film like a assistant, and it was 1 year ago.
As an editor, is that?
Yeah,
yeah,
editor,
okay.
yeah. But I was the assistant of the editor, but with the director we were always talking, and I could make some advices or upwards. And while we were editing, the director wanted to put some images that for me it doesn't work for the structure, and it was a film about the indigenous cosmovision with the actual society, and for me it wasn't working. And this year I saw the film in the cinema, and I realized that what the director wants to put, that image that for me wasn't working, they were awesome. They were the most important thing of the film. And I said, oh, great, that she really put that image. She did what she was to do. But I feel so bad for me because I couldn't realize that was so important for the film, so essential. So I also want to ask you, how do you work with your editor, with Chauvini, if he started working with you when you are starting with the idea, with everything?
Well, you are pointing to something that is very human, that we make mistakes and we overlook things that somebody else sees. And I make these mistakes on a daily basis as well. So you're not alone to make mistakes and misjudge things. And this is the reason why I never want to have any yes men on my set. So the cinematographer has his own voice, and he tells me this doesn't look good, it has no rhythm. The editor would tell me it doesn't look like some real intensity here. My feet are getting numb, he would say. So I immediately listen, but sometimes I would tell him, no, we need some time out. There has been so much intensity, and an enormous amount of intensity is coming at us. We need a moment of at least 20 seconds to breathe calmly and settle back in as an audience. So I try to see it always with the eyes of an audience. And I would like, as you are speaking about editing, I would like to speak about a technical thing, how I would approach editing. I watch the footage together with the editor only one single time, once. And while we are watching it, sometimes I stop and I write in longhand. I write a logbook, like a voyager, a sailor would write a logbook, and I describe what is happening. And I put some sort of time in 17 minutes and 40 seconds. All of a sudden the subject of my discourse changes. And I go through it, and we look very carefully at the footage once. And in my description of the logbook, sometimes if something is extraordinary, I put an exclamation mark. In some specific, very, very special cases, I make 2 exclamation marks. And in some, you see, sometimes footage comes across you where you don't know, how did you deserve that this fell into your lap as if it were a gift of God. And I make 3 exclamation marks. And I tell the editor, no matter what you think about this, if this material is not in the film, I have lived in vain. So, okay. And he immediately understands. And then I go into editing and I work very, very fast. I mean, not hectic, but I start to plow through the material and I only look for footage that has exclamation marks. Only that. I never go back to the mediocre stuff. Very, very, very rarely I go back because something is not understandable if I don't have a moment which is not that strong, but it connects the dots. So I would eventually go back, but writing a logbook is essential for me because when I watch it and I have to write it down, I can memorize. I can memorize up to 50, 55 hours of film. And I know when he says, why don't we go to take number 4, I say to him, because the actor doesn't have the handle of the door in his hand yet. And he says, really, and looks at it, and no, he doesn't, because I remember it. But this memory disappears fairly quickly. 10 days after I'm done editing, I have forgotten, or it dwindles away. But it's helpful to go immediately for the essence of things. And I do not create 22 parallel versions, and then people can't decide what to do. So you have to be careful, and you have to go for the real essentials quickly. And because of that, I edit very fast. Grizzly Man was edited in 9 days. Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call was... I was editing during filming or putting things roughly together, but I delivered the final cut of the film 2 weeks after I finished shooting. My Son, What Have You Done? A feature film I made right after that. I delivered 5 days after shooting finished. So I'm really, really working fast and plowing through it. And sometimes young filmmakers tell me, full of pride, I shot 350 hours of footage, and my heart sinks because that young man had no idea what he was doing. He was just shooting and shooting and shooting and rolling the camera. You organize your camera, organize your footage, organize your story, and you will end up with 15 hours of footage. Into the Abyss, where you saw the beginning, had something like 8 hours of footage, and it's almost a 2 hours film. I shot almost nothing. And sometimes it is wise not to shoot too much. Bad Lieutenant, I shot only what I needed for editing, what I saw on the screen. And you know, there was also a reason. Number 1, I was working fast. Number 2, I saved a lot of money. I never went overtime, not 1 hour. And I delivered the film $2.6 million under budget. This is unheard of in Hollywood, and all of a sudden the producer wants to marry me now. And and the real reason, the secret reason behind it was, I believed that the producer who only made B pictures and very stupid films, or many stupid films, some better ones, that they would start to touch it and try to re-edit. But there's no material for re-editing. So there's no choice, there's no chance. And quite often you have to be smart, you have to be a good soldier. And the good soldier has to understand the battlefield. You have to understand the terrain. You have to be prudent in the terrain. You have to be street smart. You have to steal, you have to forge, you have to open a car and move it. You have to do things that you normally would not do. You have to steal a camera if necessary. So, that about editing, yeah.
Hello? Me? Okay. Yeah. Mr. Herzog, I'd like to ask you a question, and it's more kind of a personal question for a creative artist. It's about stress. I watched carefully Burden of Dreams, Grizzly Man, almost all your movies. And in Burden of Dreams, you were going down a river, and the boat was beating rocks right and left. Your cameraman was cut until almost the bone of the hand. Everything was going wrong. In Grizzly Man, you heard the most horrifying tape I imagine somebody can hear. And you interview people with who are going to die in weeks. And I compare to myself, I only been once in a crash, and I saw people without legs and arms, and I still can remember them, I hear the sound. But I'm thinking one thing, the level of anxiety you have during making these things, and you always seem so calm to me. Your voice is so calm, it seems like you are unshakable. So are you being cast in some kind of iron, German iron, or you have some personal philosophy that I would very much like you to share?
Difficult question. Yes, there's a general attitude, and I try to be a good soldier of cinema, meaning the good soldier has a sense of duty, and your duty is to follow your vision. You have to follow your vision. And if you don't have a deeply embedded vision where you see something at the horizon that no one else sees, and you want to share it for the collective dreams of everyone, then you have a reason to be fearless. I'm completely fearless. It's not in my dictionary, because I follow, and of course I fortify myself with enough philosophy. For example, when I started to work with Kinski, I fortified myself with enough philosophy to take whatever would come at me. So my attitude has been, anything that is being thrown at me, I will deal with. I will handle it. Because there's nobody behind you. You are the only and last one where things have to be handled. There's nobody behind you. And this is the reason why I dislike first days of shooting. The first 1 or 2 hours are always awful. And I have a little ritual. The camera assistant has to glue a yellow stripe of gaffer's tape on my heart and a wider gaffer tape on my back between the shoulder blades. Because sillily enough, I think this makes me somehow armed against what's coming at me. And I hate the first hour of shooting, because all of a sudden everybody looks at me, and I thought, and my heart sinks for a moment, and I think, what me? Why it's me? And I look around and there's no one behind me. And then I settle in very quickly. But it's only the moment of feeling not right is always the first half hour, 1 hour in shooting a film. And you have to find some sort, maybe a ritual, maybe whatever, to overcome it. Otherwise, you are not allowed to have much emotion. You have to do your duty. You have to deliver. A camera is always a no-cry zone. Nobody cries. If anyone cries, it has to be the audience. Never the actor, never the director, never anyone on the set. It has to be the audience. So I delegate some of my emotions straight to the audience. And you have to understand how filmmaking functions and how to achieve it. It cannot be really taught, but I try to embed it in your heart. And otherwise, in real life, things are of similar, let's say, similar unexpectedness. I was shot while I was doing an interview. It's on YouTube. It was very insignificant, but I just wanted to finish the interview. And everybody fled. So the sound man was already hitting the dirt, and the cameraman fled with the camera. But I was left behind. I just wanted to finish my sentence at least. So you have to be prepared for the unexpected, and that's only functioning through life experience and through God knows philosophy, whatever. Maybe people who are religious probably have a certain amount of strength within them, because they can relate to a power behind and above them, and that means God. But since I'm not religious, I have no one. There's no consolation. There is not a single person. And money never solves any problem. The big problems are solved by faith. Faith moves the mountains, and it's not the money. So, what else can I say? You have to think the unthinkable when you start a film. Think about everything that can go wrong, and normally everything goes wrong when you are shooting a film. So you have to prepare yourself, and have sometimes it's helpful to have a prefabricated answer. You see, for example, when I was threatening Kinski to kill him, to shoot him, I told him, Klaus, at that time I said Mr. Kinski to him, I said to him, Mr. Kinski, I've thought about the unthinkable long time, and we both have a duty that is beyond our personal feelings. There's something bigger than the two of us, and there's something bigger than each individual separately. And I have thought about this case long enough. I had half a year of time to think about it. Now I do not need a single second to decide what to do. And I said to him, and I was unarmed, I mean, it's completely distorted in the media. I said to him, you can leave the set and go on the speedboat, but you will not reach the bend of the river without having 8 bullets in your head. And then all of a sudden he screamed for police, and the next police station was 450 kilometers away, somewhere in the jungle. And I could, with $20, they would have testified that it was a hunting accident. So, but in other words, I had thought about the unthinkable, and I did not need long time to deliberate. My answer was already there. So quite often it is helpful. Yes. So.
Hi. I would like to ask you, it's a sort of an intimate question, but also a very broad one. What are the things the things you see in life today that move you into making movies? What are the type of stories that you think you want to tell, the type of things that you want to show? Something like
that. There's no recipe, there's no straight answer, but I have it in me. I am a storyteller. And I would immediately know this is big. There's a big story. And most of the time, I do not search for stories. They come at me like burglars in the night. All of a sudden, there's commotion. At 3 a.m, there's commotion, and there are 3 burglars, 5 burglars in your kitchen, and you deal with the one who comes with a knife at you. So you better deal with the first one first. So, and very often the films stumble into me. And very often people tell me a story, and I know this would be something good for an essay, but not for a movie. I can immediately tell. And there's a very interesting case, Grizzly Man, because I was not searching for a story. I was in the office of a producer who had helped me. I had not known him before, and I had some small talk, friendly talk with him in his office, a glass table with lots of papers and half-finished lunch and FedExes and so DVDs. And I stood up and I looked, I felt into my pocket because my car keys, I had placed them somewhere on the table, and I did not look for a story. I looked for my car keys, and I looked at the table, and he, the producer, thinks I spotted something. I was looking for some paper, and he shoves a paper across and he says, "We are doing an interesting film. Read it, there's an article." So normally I don't read that kind of stuff. I went home, but I read it, and immediately I returned. Half an hour later, I was back. And I asked about the status of the film. Yes, I had to start very quickly because of the salmon run, and the bear population would be very dense in these areas. And I had a hunch. And I looked him in the eye and I said, "Who is directing the film?" And now listen carefully. He said, "I'm kind of directing the film." Kind of. And I knew he was insecure. He didn't know what to do. And I I walked up and pumped my hand towards him, and I said, with my worst German accent, I said, "No, I will direct this movie now." And so he was so surprised that he shook my hand and I was in business. But in other words, a film had stumbled into me because I was looking for my car keys. So, but why did I do it? Why did I return? Because when I read this article, which gave an outline of this tragedy, I immediately knew this is big. And they don't see it. They probably do not see how big it is. Aguirre, The Wrath of God, I visited a friend who had thousands of books. He had his own library as a school when we just had left school. And I went to his place, and he was on the phone because he was lovesick. And for an hour and a half, ignored that I was around and spoke to his girlfriend who was about to leave him, and he was in commotion, and I couldn't even say properly hello to him, so I thought he may finish in 5 minutes. So I looked at the books, and I found a book which looked like for 12-year-old kids about adventures and discoveries, Alexander the Great, Magellan, Columbus, and things like that. And I opened the book, and there was a short paragraph, 14 lines about a man, Lope de Aguirre, and really written for 14-year-old kids. And I read this paragraph, and it was like a lightning going through me, and I knew this is big. This is so big. And without saying goodbye, I just left and rushed home, and I started to write. So you have to develop a sense for what is big in cinema. Quite often people tell me, there's such an interesting biography of someone. Biographies normally do not function in movies. They function in books, in biographical books, and it's not a movie story. So you have to distinguish very quickly what makes a big movie story, and you find out when you watch movies. Look at movies carefully, and again, read. Because of reading, you find a parallel world, a world of ideas, a world of stories, a world of poetry, and that probably makes you capable to understand there's something really important, really big out there. Yeah, maybe there was a young lady back there. Here in the center, can we? No, can we get the microphone back there? Pretty much in the middle back there.
Hello. I work with documentary, and I like very much the way that you mix documentary and fiction. And I think that this can may give your films a lot of freedom and jump this discussion about what is reality and what is fake, which I don't share either. But there are a little or many, but for me there is one big difference about documentary and fiction, that is maybe the ethics of how you relate to an actor or a real person, or when you interview a person that has been through some difficulties, or just making an actor go through this difficulty. And there is one film that you did, and I'm sorry, I am terrible with names, but it is, and I saw it a long time ago, and I can only remember one scene of it because it was very strong for me. It was, if I'm not wrong, it was the film about after the First Gulf War, and the wrecks. and then you go to a village and you interview a mother whose house has been gone invaded, and the mother has a son on her lap, and you ask her about the day that her husband was taken from the house, and the son is the one is on her hands, and he is actually giving all the emotion of the scene, and he's reacting to what the mother is saying the whole scene again, but you can see the boy is being is suffering. For me, it was very powerful, this image. He was, for me, being kind of tortured.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, what is the limit and that you draw? Of course, it's yours.
Yeah, it's basically the same question about the ethical borderlines. And not only did I want to film the crime against not only humanity, but the crime against creation itself. A country that was not recognizable anymore as being our planet. And of course I was looking for people who had lost speech. And this young boy, who was something like 4 years old, had spoken. The mother tells me he had spoken, but since this invasion came and somebody had his boot on his head, and they shot the father in front of him, he quit speaking, and he says, "Mama, in this world I want never to speak." And she tells me this story, and of course the boy is uncomfortable, but he's uncomfortable not because of the camera, he's uncomfortable with every single visitor. And this case was so important and so deep that I decided I would take the discomfort of 2.5 minutes with a boy who is trying to hide his face. I do it because there's such a deep question behind it. And the boy is uncomfortable with everyone who comes. So it's nothing specific about filmmaking. But of course you have to decide. You have to decide, and you have to know why you are doing things. And it should never leave you, and this question has never left me either. And I'm plowing on, and certainly I make mistakes like all of you. There's nothing specific about it, and maybe I don't see it as a mistake, but it's a zone where you can start to argue, should I have done it or should I have not done it? If it had been a special pain for the boy just to show up with a camera, I probably would not have filmed it. But it seemed to be the daily sort of life of this child. And of course, you have to do what's in you. What you see is needed for an audience. It's beyond a little boy and a mother and you with a camera. There's a world out there and you have to explain something very big, very important through this little moment. And it's something which the whole film, I kept saying, is something for the memory of the human race. It should not be television and 10 seconds, a little clip like every day on television. You have to do something that is more lasting. And you have to look beyond the tiny limitations of a moment. So, yes, I have stepped very far sometimes, and deliberately stepped very far. And I keep doing that. And at the moment, I'm working on 2 more films on death row, and it's hard work. I mean, difficult. Both the editor and I started to smoke again during editing, but I'm still. You have to have a fire within you, and if that doesn't burn inside of you, you shouldn't make films. So I'm plowing on these years. I make more films than decades ago. And I keep working, and I'm trying to do my best. And I think as long as there is breath in me, I will do my work, and I will try to do it as good as I can. Best of luck to all of you, and thank you very much. We are over time. Thank you, and thank you, Mexico.
Muchas gracias por asistir.